Hello, hello. Welcome everyone. Welcome on in. Tap the screen, share the live. Going to get started. Have some great topics to talk about tonight. If this is your first time joining in, my name is Tina. I am a happiness coach and I help people go from being in a dark place to feeling happy and fulfilled. Okay? Even despite the circumstances. So you can feel happy even when everything else around you is going to hell in a handbasket. So finding that kind of happiness and finding that within ourselves is the key. So tonight, if you're in TikTok, make sure that you tap the screen, share the live. My goal is to be able to help 1 million people heal past trauma. I do this by sharing my experience, strength, and hope. These are strategies and tools that I actually use for myself, and I use these on a regular basis. And tonight, we're going to talk about overthinking and how to deal with overthinking. I don't know about you guys, but I overthink like crazy. And I want to go into some strategies that I do use to shorten that time, although I'm sure there's some people would look at me and go, you still do it way too much. That's fine. It's still better than it was. So, and what I do with it. So first I want to start with a quote. I'm not 100% sure who it's from, but I'm sure you can Google it. But it is, "The unexamined life is not worth living." So for me, I heard that way back in my early 20s for the first time. And when I heard that, it made sense to me because I was in my healing and recovery process and I was going through this journey of self-awareness and self-discovery. And it's really important to be able to start to look at ourselves and our behaviors, and also start to critically examine our thought process and our belief systems. And that, I think, is part of healing, but it's also, for me, it was part of becoming an adult, right? When I was in my early 20s and going through this process of just really starting to think about not only, having the thoughts go through my head, but understanding why I thought those thoughts. Where did those thoughts come from? Is this the way that I want to be thinking? Or is there a different way that I could be thinking? And where could I find that kind of information of the right way to think about things? And so I don't know if you guys do this or not, but I am terrible with this, is playing the what if game. Do you ever get in a state of fear where you are thinking to yourself, well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And all of these scenarios start playing out in your head of all these things that could go wrong. And you'll notice that when you play the what if game, most of the time, like I'd say about 99% of the time, when we play the what if game, it's what if something goes wrong? What if something goes bad? And we do this as a survival mechanism to try and mitigate the challenges that we are coming up against. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure kind of thing. So when you do that, and when you grow up in a household like I did, that you are always trying to put plan B, plan C, plan D, all the way down through the alphabet together. Well, if the abuser does this, then I'm going to do this. If the abuser does this, then I'm going to do that. And so you're always continually planning, and that is an excellent survival mechanism. The problem is when you are still using survival mechanisms, when you're not in a survival situation, that becomes a problem. And that ends up harming us rather than helping us. So it's important to understand, am I truly in that life or death situation? And is this the best way to be handling it? And why am I thinking this way? So Our overthinking is our attempts to control, because we're afraid that if these things happen, we will not have control. Just like when we were a child, we didn't actually have control. So the only way that we could feel that sense of control is by having all these different contingency plans, which is great. It's not always a bad thing, okay? Because some of these survival tools that we developed in childhood, yes, you can look at it's like, oh, I was traumatized. Well, there's some gifts in that trauma if you choose to format them that way. I'm not saying trauma is a gift, and I don't wish that on people. But if it did happen to you, you can salvage some of the strategies that you developed in order to survive and turn those into gifts. And so, example, contingency plans. So because I'm really good at contingency plans and going, okay, well, if this happens, then what are we going to do? And so back in when it was the Y2K thing and I was working and I was in transport and logistics, I was part of the team that was coming up with all the different procedures that were required in case, because I don't know, for some of you that are a little bit younger, but you know, the fear was that everything was going to shut down as soon as the clock struck midnight on the year 2000, because the computers weren't programmed or set up to be able to roll over to 2000. They were only set up to 1999, right? And it was all game over from there. So we had to create all these crazy, ridiculous contingency plans in case the systems went down. How are we still going to process orders? How are we still going to ship soup? And how are we going to still ship the grocery items in the warehouse? And how are we going to receive the orders? How are we going to get those to the warehouse? You know, what if the building alarms go off and they go crazy? What are we going to do? And what if certain vehicles don't work? And all of these things. So my skills that I developed in overthinking and going through all of that stuff actually came in quite handy for that particular scenario. So I'm really good at being able to come up with all these different kinds of plans, and also able to see potential pitfalls that other people may not be aware of because of the hypervigilance I developed as a child. That, you know, there's slight little changes in the environment and I'll pick those up. They're not always 100% right, but that's okay. It's like every once in a while, even a blind squirrel will find a nut. So it's a matter of the repetition. So I've done this a lot of times. Now, that can be problematic when you're spending too much time in that mode. So anytime that we get stuck in something for too long of a period of time, that becomes a problem. We become stagnant. So overthinking in and of itself isn't such a bad thing. It is the amount of time that you spend in overthinking that is the problem, right? Because what that does is it prevents you from actually taking any action, actually moving forward with things in your life, because there are so many scenarios that could potentially come up. It's hard to plan for all of them. So some of the ways that I will help deal with the overthinking that I have is setting a time limit on it of how long you're going to be in this mode. And then at the end of that time limit, go do something else. So even if your mind still is on that subject or whatever it is that you're overthinking about, oftentimes when the negative overthinking is when we're sitting still, when we're idle. So if we actually physically get up and go do something else, even if that's a mundane chore like going to do the laundry or grocery shopping or something like that, at least you're getting something done that is on your mundane everyday task list that you need to do. and you can still have that overthinking in the background where it's not being a detriment to you. So that is one way of setting that time limit, and then go do something so that you get at least something crossed off your list that you're productive, right? The other way to do overthinking, and especially if you're playing the what if game, if you're going to play the what if game, then you have to play it the right way. And the right way to play the what if game is, what if everything turns out okay? Because I can promise you, all this time that we spend trying to avoid problems from happening, the pain that we're aware of that could potentially happen, that's not when the problems happen. It's when we think everything's going to go right, and then all of a sudden we're blindsided because, well, we thought if everything went right, there'd be no problems. Well, no, if there's no problems, you're probably dead. So it's a matter of understanding that with everything that we go through, there will be problems, and it's okay that there's problems, and it's a matter of reassuring ourselves that, number one, whatever problem comes up, my favorite saying to myself is, I will figure it out. How? I don't know, but I know that I'm resourceful enough to seek the answers. If I don't know how to solve something, I'll go ask for help, or I'll look it up on Google, or I'll ask ChatGPT, or whatever it is. It's like I will find a way to get some help. And this is something that I did early in my recovery, that I started to lean on a power greater than myself. So and especially if things seem impossible, that's where prayer and meditation come in for me. That has been something that's really helpful. And for me, that was something I fought for the longest time, because prayer is not logical. Now, if you're a spiritual person, you're like, of course prayer is logical, Tina, what are you talking about? But at the time I was like, there's no evidence with that. Well, there is some scientific evidence if you look into neuroscience, the benefit of being able to speak a prayer or speak into reality the things that it is that you want. And when you focus on that burning desire and cultivating that of the things that you want, those are more likely to happen. So even if it isn't 100% exactly the way that you imagine it, oftentimes it will be very, very close, or better, usually, or better than what you imagine. But focusing on the things that you want, you have a tendency to move towards those things and to start to align yourself with the possibility of things going right instead of things going wrong. So that is why, if you're going to play the what if game, focus on what if everything turns out right. What would happen next? And start planning for those things. I can promise you, you're going to find a whole shit ton of new problems that'll need to be solved at that next level, right? The problem is it's a little harder to imagine because if we've never been to that level, we don't know what kind of challenges we're going to come up against. This is where we have to start stacking evidence of previous challenges that we've been through, that we've actually made it through. Because the fact that we're here today tells us we've made it through all of the challenges that we've faced so far. Maybe not very gracefully, maybe not the way we wanted to, but we've still made it. We're still here, we're still breathing. So focusing on that, it's like I've made it through every single challenge I've ever faced. Now, I may not have made it the way I wanted to, but I've made it. I'm still here. And that, in and of itself, especially since I had a suicide attempt at 17, the fact that I'm still here at 52 is pretty freaking amazing. So, I'm really grateful for that. So, play the what if game the right way. Focus on what if this goes right. What if this turns out better than I thought? What would that look like? what would the next steps be? It's like, okay, so it's like, say you're planning a dream vacation, right? And you're like, normally you're like, but what if I go there and I have a problem with my visa, or I have a problem, I don't know the language, or what if my credit cards get stolen, or something like that. Like all these crazy things, you can come up with a million different scenarios. What if I get sick? What if the flight gets canceled? What if the plane crashes? What, like there's all these crazy, it can really snowball out of control. So focusing on, it's like, well, what if I not only land there, but I get upgraded on the flight and I get like VIP service and all of this kind of stuff. So you start focusing on those kind of what ifs, it gives you a whole different experience. And then pay attention to whatever feelings may come up that make you feel uncomfortable with that, because that'll be a good signal of where you're going to pull back from success. Because oftentimes success is more scary because it's unknown. And as humans, we typically tend to avoid the unknown because it's scary. We don't know in that dark cave if there's an animal there ready to kill us, right? So it's like that programmed fear in our DNA, our psyche, whatever it is there of fear of the unknown. And there might be nothing, but there might be something. We don't know. But when we plan and we prepare for ourselves today, and we make ourselves as strong as we can be for today, and we focus on the things that we've already overcome, then that prepares us in a better way for any challenges that come up. Because I'm sure if we think of our past and we think of some of the problems that have come up, were those problems that we actually anticipated? Were those part of the scenarios that were what ifs? No, usually they weren't. It's like when I think of any of the problems that I've encountered, I did not anticipate any of them. Why? Because that's why they were problems. But I still made it through. And I figured things out. And this is kind of the way that you need to play the what if game. Play it the right way. Okay? Also, I want you to, if you are overthinking, I want you to actually, instead of trying to stop yourself from overthinking, I actually want you to lean into it and give voice to the fears, because that's basically what overthinking is we are afraid that we won't be able to handle something. So instead of trying to say, oh, I need to stop overthinking, lean into it and really figure out, well, what is it that I'm afraid of? And this is usually where what ifs come in. And what I want you to do is give your fears a voice. And we do this by writing this stuff out and taking it seriously of, okay, so what if this happens? What if I lose my job? And then I want you to sit there and critically think, what would you actually do if you lost your job? What would be the next step? Okay, and if that happened, then what would you do? Okay, what if you still couldn't find another job, right? Like, so if you say, well, what if I lost my job? Well, I guess I would find another one. Okay, well, what if you can't find another job? Well, I guess I would ask some family members for help, or you know what, I would start selling water on the beach or something like that. Whatever it is, you can figure out different ways and really figure out, okay, I didn't think that I would be able to handle losing my job, but now I have a couple of steps that I could take should that occur. So now you have a couple of ideas of what you could possibly do, and look at that, not that you have to plan out every possible scenario, but within a few minutes you were able to figure out some ideas of things that you could possibly do. So when you take that principle, you can look at whatever problems do come up if you give yourself a little bit of time to think, you can figure out at least what the next couple of steps are going to be. And once you complete those next couple of steps, then you can reassess and go, okay, now what? Now what do I do, right? So as long as you know that, that often will ease some of the fears that you have of all of the things that could go wrong. And what I want you to understand is, having in the last couple of years, some of the things that I feared the most actually have happened to me, and I did not die. I have not died. I am not a ghost, although I'm very pale. I am not a ghost. So it can actually be a gift for your fears to actually happen to you. The things that you thought, oh, if that happens, it's just going to be the end of the world. And you know what? Maybe it is an end of your old way of being, your old way of being afraid of that thing happening. Now that it's happened, you're like, okay, well, I'm still here. I didn't get struck by lightning. I haven't been wiped off the face of the earth. So now what do I do? Okay, well, these are the next steps that I need to take. And you just focus on those next few steps that you're going to be facing. And it's kind of like driving in fog, right? You can't, if you try to put your high beams on to see, like, you know, shine more light on it so that I can see what's going on and try to figure things out, all that does is produce more glare and you can't really see. So you have to turn the high beams off, go with your regular lights, and try to focus on what's right in front of the car, right? And you focus on where's the edge of the road and the middle line, so that you're driving at least with what's in front of you. You may also have to slow down. You can't go as fast as you were going because you can't see as clearly. So when you get into these situations when some of your worst fears have actually happened to you, this is where you're going to start slowing down. You're going to focus. Don't try to, shine the light and figure everything out. You're going to focus on what's in front of you. What are the next logical steps that I need to take to keep moving forward? And when you do that, then you at least are moving in some sort of direction, right? And make sure that you're not doing that too fast so that you can adjust should something else pop up, right? So if something else jumps out in front of you and now you see it, you have time to be able to avoid that other disaster that could happen, right? So another part of leaning into the overthinking, and this kind of goes a little bit along the lines of when you're beating up on yourself. So if you're beating up on yourself, what I want you to do is actually give your fears a voice by listing it out, by writing it out. So this does a couple of things. It externalizes it from your head, so it's not just running around in a cycle in your mind. You are externalizing it, dumping it out on the paper. Once it's out on paper, you can actually objectify it and you can think critically about it, because when you start to look at it, now you can start to question, is that actually true? Okay? Is that actually true? And part of you might be like, yeah, you know what, I am, useless. I am worthless. I am blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is that's going on in your mind, those things that you're saying, and maybe at the time it may feel that way, but I want you to start shifting to a more critical aspect. So if you're going to overthink, we need to critically overthink, and we're going to start to question, and we're going to cross-examine ourselves, basically. We're going to start to look for evidence that would actually disprove this, because oftentimes that critical thinking, that judgment of self ends up coming out as statements that are said as if they are fact. And now I want you to start to look at that and say, okay, what evidence is there if somebody else came along and they wanted to disprove this, that you're worthless, that you're not a nice person? So what kind of proof would they be able to come up with? And what kind of circumstances or situations would they raise to say, you know what, it's not true that Tina's a bitch, because she's done this, and this, and this, right? And these situations. And it's like, now you're stacking evidence to prove the judgment or the criticism of yourself. Now, this isn't to say that you can't fix all of those judgments. Maybe if you're looking at something and you're like, you know what, I was a bitch in that situation. So that's where you have to take ownership of it and go, okay, if this is true, then how would I deal with that? If I'm looking at this and I know for myself that this is true, well, I could go apologize, I could go correct the mistake that I've made, I could go make a different decision. There's all kinds of things that we can do if it's true, but we cannot do that if we're not looking at things critically and understanding what's going on. And the only way to do that is to get that out of your mind and onto some paper so that you can properly assess the situation. Okay? So those are some of the things with overthinking, being able to examine your thoughts critically from a perspective of, is this actually true? If it is, then what? So again, what if this is true? So if you're going to play that what if game, play it correctly. What if I am those things that I'm judging myself for? Is that something that I can fix? Is that something that I can change? So example, it's like, oh, you know what? I'm short. I'm 5'3". Okay. So, well, I can't really make myself taller unless I'm wearing heels, but that's not technically making myself taller. So if I can't actually change that particular thing, it's like, okay, well, what can I do to adjust or adapt? Okay, I could wear heels. Am I going to wear heels all the time? No, probably because I'll twist an ankle or something crazy. But that does make me taller. And I can also critically think, it's like, well, why is it important for me to be taller? And answer those questions. And you may find out that it's really not that important. You just thought maybe other people's opinions are coming into play here. And you're like, okay, well, it's actually important for them, but it's not important for me. It's like, okay, well, I have to be this tall to get on this ride kind of thing, right? Then it might be a thing, right? But it's like, okay, well, if you're 6 years old and you're trying to get on a ride that you're not tall enough to go on, you may have to wait a couple of years. This is not the end of the world, right? And there's other rides that you can go on. There's other things that you can do. So it's a matter of understanding what is it what are you judging yourself of? What are you overthinking on? And then what can you do to actually change those and modify those behaviors so that you do things differently, if it is true, okay? Or you can get to a point of, actually, this isn't even a problem. It's like, it's a problem for that other person, or it's a problem, you know, for this particular role. Like maybe you want to be a basketball player and there's a height restriction, right? And it's like, okay, well, if there's a height restriction, then either I can do that, or I can show them that even if I'm 5'3", I'm the most badass basketball player out there, and they'll have no choice but to have me on the team regardless of my height. So you can also overcome whatever criteria that they have that is limiting you. So is there a way to overcome the limitation instead of, and then focusing on that? It's like focusing on the solution rather than the problem of, oh, I'm only 5'3". Well, why does that matter? Right? So it all depends on why it matters, and then what you can do with that. And then challenging yourself and thinking critically of, how can I, what if this wasn't a problem? Well, okay, if there wasn't a height restriction for me to get on the basketball team, then I would try out for the basketball team, and I would, well, that would mean it's all based on my skills of how well I play basketball, of whether or not I get on the team, not some arbitrary height restriction, right? So this is where I say, when you're going to play the what if game, make sure that you're playing it in the correct way of, okay, what if this wasn't a problem? What if this limitation that I think is true isn't actually true? Oh, okay, well then these are the next things that would happen. Then I guess then it wouldn't be a problem, and I would do these things. And I promise you're going to have more things that are the next steps of if you remove that limitation. This is why it's so important to actually critically examine what it is that we are actually thinking and whether or not it's actually true. And the thing is when we do this, you'll find that you actually don't overthink, because now you're actually focusing on solutions, and we don't spend as much time. So oftentimes the thing that we call overthinking is just us avoiding taking action because we're afraid of a certain outcome. And more times than not, we're not afraid of what the failures could be. We're afraid of what would happen on the other side of success, because we don't know what is on that other side, because we haven't ever been there before. So knowing that everything comes back to there's either love or there's fear. Fear is false evidence appearing real, and every time that we find ourselves afraid of something, it's like, well, this isn't actually real. So how can I be loving to myself? How can I focus on expanding my thought process to find a solution so that I can overcome the situation? And if you can't, maybe you don't have the tools, or you don't have the know-how, or it's like, okay, example. I got a new SIM card that I was trying to activate, and it wasn't working, and it was driving me crazy, and I didn't quite have time to go through it. It just wasn't accepting, there's something wrong with the billing address. And I need to call them, but I didn't have the ability to call them. Why? Because I'm trying to activate a SIM card for a phone. So I'm like, okay, I need to get somebody else's phone. So I need to go outside of my circle of available tools, and I have to go to somebody else that has the tools that I need, that has the knowledge that I need. And I have to get assistance from somebody to activate this stupid SIM card. So this is small things that can happen. So sometimes you may have to put something on pause. Don't be afraid. It's like, I don't know how to solve this. Write that down in your exercise of when you're writing things down. And I don't know how to solve this, but I'm going to table this for now, and I'm going to come back to it at this other time. So set a time frame for how long you're going to overthink, and then set a time frame for when you're going to get back to something that you've put on pause. So those are some tools that I use. Some I need to use a little more frequently than others, but it's progress, not perfection, right? So guys, I hope you found that helpful. If this is your first time joining me and you haven't been on the channel before, any of the lives are going to be posted on my YouTube channel. You can find me at Coach Tina B 125, and you will see all of my live trainings posted there. You will also see some of the artwork that I do as part of my art therapy. Those are all part of the thumbnails, and you will be able to click on links to be able to purchase prints or merchandise for those. Okay, so guys, I'll be back again tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Make sure if you found this helpful to tap the screen, share the live, and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Okay, guys? All right, have a great night. Take care. Bye.